This is Lessons Learned, and I'm your host, Matt Kennard, CEO of Better Lesson. Join me as we dig in with visionary state and district level leaders who share our mission to support every K-12 educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners. Lessons Learned is brought to you by Better Lesson. Let's get started. All right, welcome back to the Lessons Learned podcast, season 2. We're all about thinking about post-secondary readiness, how we're supporting our educators, how we're thinking about kind of that key question of making educational magic happen for our students and for our educators moving forward. And I'm really excited today to be joined by a special guest. And, one of the things that I've enjoyed is getting to talk to a number of different folks in different hats. And I'm excited to introduce Mr. Adam Bowen, Superintendent of New Buffalo Area Schools. Now, a lot to talk about, dedicated education leader, a visionary in the education space, over 15 years teaching, coordinating, and guiding students, a 2022 Principal of the Year. His school has won multiple National Blue Ribbon Awards and won the 2024 MACUL Award for Most Innovative District of the Year in Michigan. So a lot to bring to the table. Adam, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the Lessons Learned podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here today.
Now, Adam, the one question we love to open up with is, you are now a superintendent. You've been a principal. You've seen a lot of the educator journey. But what got you started? What made you say, hey, listen, the thing I want to be is an educator?
Yeah, so it started actually, when I was in high school. When I was in high school, I was doing Cisco, and Cisco was, all the networking and whatnot. And I was in an elementary classroom because we were running fiber into different classrooms. It was right when we were trying to wire, all the buildings with high-speed internet. And I was in that classroom and watching a teacher teach. And I thought to myself, wow, that would be pretty cool to do, and I was in my senior year. And I ended up going into computer engineering because I loved computers and working on that. And I went to my first semester into college and was doing drafting and all that. And I said, nope, this is not it. And immediately I thought about, that teacher teaching in front of that class. And that's when I changed my major to elementary education and haven't looked back since.
That's amazing. It's funny. We talk a lot about how can we get kids to see teaching and learning, not just as a student, but to actually get to observe the magic of what happens when you see a teacher connect with a student. And it's unlike anything else.
Yeah. And we'll probably get to this later on, but this is what we're trying to do too. When we're talking about post-secondary opportunities, that's exactly what we want to do is get kids in front of that so they can have the love and the passion to maybe be an educator themselves.
It's interesting as we talk about post-secondary readiness. One of the things I think has been interesting, maybe over the last 12 months, certainly in the last 6 months, it feels like we've had a very complex conversation start to get simpler, at least as a district leader or a state leader, which is you've got 2 jobs. You've got to be able to create students who are graduating genuinely post-secondary ready, right? And not just, look, this number of kids got accepted to college, but these kids can persist through college in whatever form that may be, 4-year, 2-year, dual enrollment, whatever you may have or in a high wage, high availability job, right? That, keeps them local, but puts them in a really good stead. So you've got that job to do. And then we've got to show that we're putting the money that we spend towards that kind of highest and best use of graduating post-secondary ready students. That simplification in some ways is great, right? Because it's like you got 2 jobs to do and it's easy to do that. But then coordinating the activities of a team to get there is a lot of work. So as you think about, in your schools in New Buffalo, like how do you all think about post-secondary readiness, and maybe how's some of that clarity helped you all think about aligning the educators, the students, and the community?
Yeah, we really been working on this past couple of years in our strategic plan. One of the core pillars is academics, and with that academics, we're trying to build success for students, specifically learning systems that either prepare kids for the workforce environment or post-secondary. And one of the things, that I really focus on is, what are the kids' dreams and what can we do to make sure that they're meeting those dreams? And that's working with them. We have a student advocate. So that student advocate, part of their job is to make sure that they're having those conversations with those kids and help guiding them. A counselor also is making sure that we're providing those classes for students so they're either ready for that workforce environment or they're ready for that post-secondary. Some great things that we've done is we've paired up with another school district. Actually, we're in Michigan, but just right across the Indiana border, with a career technical academy, and that has been very successful. And we're having kids that are coming out of that with certificates that are employable right now. And so that has been a great collaboration and partnership with AK Smith. That's the center that the kids go to. We've had kids just last year go into a union trade apprenticeship. It was through electrician, through a carpentry. We've had mechanics, welders. Welders that had all their certifications, so they can just go right to the workforce and start making some really good money as well in some of those trades. And then, we've had kids that are going to Harvard. So we're doing what we can to make sure that they're having those, AP courses, and giving them, the rigorous opportunity. And then the other opportunities of making sure that they're doing those assessments and tests to make sure that it'll get them into those kind of places. So I believe last year, we're a very small school district. Last year we graduated probably 47 kids, and out of those 47, there were 5 that went to Michigan University. That's a tough school to get into. So we're trying to have that rigorous academic curriculum and what have you, so the kids have these opportunities where they can get into schools like a Michigan.
I love that idea too, that it seems like you have wrapped the idea of academic rigor, whether you're going into industry or going to school, you're going to get a rigorous education that gives you something that's deployable day one from when you have to go. And you have to persist, right? We talk about post-secondary readiness. It's that persistence through the choice, that ability to actually go and graduate, to go and stay and be promoted, to go and find that career choice, or continue on that education. I really enjoy that. When we talk about connecting workforce needs, I think sometimes we think about, we should just offer lots of CTE pathways versus more curated pathways against community needs. How do you all go through that balance for your students?
Well, it actually kind of starts. We have a platform called Zello, and Zello is kind of that survey that kind of says, okay, what are your interests? What do you want to do? And actually, lines kids up and gives them some choices of what they would potentially be in, or what their future is. And then they work with, building principals, like I said, student advocate, counselor. And then we just try to make sure that we do whatever we can in our power to make sure that those courses are lined up, that those opportunities at the high school level are lined up. And then also, trying to connect throughout the community, where we're giving them some experiences of, hey, you want to go into, engineering. Well, we're doing this project where there's engineers involved in this project. Why don't you come check this out or be part of some of these meetings and whatnot? So we're trying to get them that exposure, where they can really say, yeah, this is something that I want to do, before you go to, like me, right? When I went to college and I got into drafting, I'm like, this is not me. So we want to, give those opportunities before. And, another thing is like aligning the electives. So we've been doing some out of the box stuff where we're trying to do some electives. If we don't have them here, then we find them online, and have the kids explore those through online. So each kid has their own, it's called educational development plan. And that plan, they are able to take their courses and line them up, based on some of that survey stuff that I was talking about. So it's really been working out well. And we're getting kids what they need in terms of education.
One of the things I think that's interesting about this too is it also predicates a lot of community involvement and communication. And I think one of the things you look at great educational institutions in the kind of K-12 space, you're starting in fifth and sixth grade to talk about options and give kids choice and help them understand where they can go. Can you talk a little bit about that, you know, that communication link for you all?
Yeah. So, one thing that also popped in my mind too when we were talking, we started New Buffalo Area Schools a daycare, and we actually have a high school student that is kind of volunteering their time in there. And now over the summer, they're working, and with that, they found that passion where they know that they want to do early childhood development. So we're going to work with them and through the state of Michigan, make sure they get their CDA, certificate. So maybe when they graduate, they'll have already completed that, and then they'll be completely, you know, uh, ready for a job right when they get out. And then if they want to continue their post secondary, whether it's associates or a 4-year school, then they can con- continue to explore that. So that was another great kind of community connection and whatnot.
Other than parents talking to students, like helping kids get, the I think the most alarming stat I always find in education is the fact that like the number one predicator on whether or not you're going to go to a 4-year college, whether or not your parents went to one, because right, it's a communication gap and a pathway skilling gap. How are you all thinking about that communication and where it starts and that community involvement as maybe a way to help guide kids to understand the full range of choice they have?
Sure, that starts early on. We actually have what's called the Bison Trust, and the Bison Trust is a $25,000 scholarship that's offered to kids if they continue to Buffalo area schools from fifth grade on. And so we're starting back in middle school of sitting down with kids, communicating with parents that, hey, this is an option that you guys have. You can take advantage of that if you go to a 2-year school, if you go to a 4-year school, or you can do it and go to a trade school, and we can pay for the coursework and the tools and whatnot. So that communication starting early on in middle school, we offer some parent nights, where we're talking about our curriculum, what's available through that. And then as you get into the high school years, you're sitting down with kids. You are having those parent nights where you're inviting them in to talk about more of the coursework and things like that. I mean, we're getting ready here in a couple weeks to kick off our school year. We'll have our high school principal, speaking about all these class offerings along with the counselor, and things like that on those nights. So those are the kind of ways that we're trying to communicate that out. And then also we're trying to showcase some of this through, sharing it to the public through our social media of, hey, I went to New Buffalo. I had a $25,000 scholarship. This is how I took advantage of it. Now I'm a nurse here at this hospital. And so there's some really cool things that we're able to do and give back to the kids of the community with that scholarship.
I love that idea of community connection. And I think too often we fail to give kids the full breadth of choice that sits in front of them, right? And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for, what can I find that speaks to me and that aligns? This is all about change management too, right? And implementation. I know that you all have done a lot of work to think about how do you prepare your educators to take on some of these shifts and changes. How do you keep staff aligned? You're doing a lot of innovative work. I can imagine it'd be very easy for someone to feel like, hey, I'm here to teach, and who's moving my cheese, so to speak. How are you thinking about that staff alignment? And how do you think about that career readiness for the folks who are coming in?
Yeah. So like I alluded to, I mean, we're a very small school district, right? And so the math department is 4 teachers, the ELA department is 4 teachers. So one of the things that we really capitalize on is Better Lesson. Better Lesson is helping us out, connecting teachers. And, a great example is like foreign language. So we have, a couple foreign language teachers here at New Buffalo, but they're in different buildings. So for them to be able to collaborate and connect is difficult. So Better Lessons kind of helps us fill that gap. I know that the elementary school teacher who teaches Spanish has joined Better Lessons for a number of years and loves it because she's connected with a person that understands that foreign language aspect. And they've worked on developing a scope and sequence and assessments, and they've done that partnership for 3 years. So it's having that kind of professional development opportunity for your teachers that really connects with them. It makes it purposeful. They're not just sitting in a massive PD session and learning about math when they're a Spanish teacher. So that's been very powerful. The other thing that really in the past couple of years that we've been using with Better Lesson is that we've been taking some of our directors and pairing them up with Better Lesson. And when we first did this, I think it was kind of newer or unique maybe, because they're like, most of the time we just pair people up with teachers. We don't really pair up like a, food service director or the director of technology. So, and what I've found is that, those people are on islands, right? And they're by themselves. So they need people to connect with and bounce some ideas off to lead, their people or the district. And so that's been an awesome partnership that we found. And, I talked about daycare, Kate, who's running our daycare, has been doing Better Lessons for a couple of years and has that person that she can connect to, and help, guide her and lead her with some of those, things that she wants to implement with her staff. So yeah, professional development is very, very important and crucial, to the success of your school. And it has to be meaningful and purposeful.
Yeah, we love the idea of like just in time and job embedded, right? And individualized. And I think to your point that, that need for support in a thing that you're trying to do tomorrow, right, becomes so critical when you want someone to it's fine to do broad-based introduction of ideas, but really what you have to do is hit someone where they are in terms of what they need and what that looks like. You've done so much work with your teachers. I think you alluded to as you got into your directors. I think that leaders are often an underlooked part of professional learning. And I think that we get people who are in the principal seat, or we have folks who are instructional leaders or academic leaders or sit in the cabinet, and we so often don't offer them that day-to-day support in the same way. I know that you all have made an investment in that. You talked a little bit about in terms of leaders, particularly those who would have, say, non-traditional titles or people who normally get professional learning. In your experience, how often are leaders overlooked when we try to get into this type of work?
I think quite a bit. I mean, especially when you talk about that cabinet or director level, right? Because, those people are so critical too in your daily operations, and they can make or break, your district. So, and it's, having a plan and goals and then someone helping to help you talk about it, and guide you through that and give you some feedback of some other ideas and whatnot to keep moving that needle. And so that's so important. And then also it's a safe space, right? Where, you have that person that's actually not in this community where, they know that there's that comfort that, that person, I don't know, is just in a different spot, which sometimes makes a huge difference. But being a leader in getting what you need and tailored to something that is important to you is, I think, when you make your most growth. And that is something that can't be found like with a one size, fits all PD opportunity. So having that one-on-one coach is very important, and I've had Better Lesson coach for a number of years. And, they've helped me tremendously. And I think it's very important to have that person.
I think coaching is something that we're really excited to be able to do with you. And I think that individualized need matters. As you're a leader looking at your team, has it also helped open up new collaborative pathways for them? Do you see more innovative ways that they work with each other as a result of having had that coaching?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because so many times, even though you might be the technology person, I mean, think about all the departments or all the buildings that they impact. So it really does require, people to connect with other people and collaborate and get other ideas throughout the different departments in the school. So yeah, it does open up more collaborative areas.
This year has been an interesting one, I think, in the back to school kickoff. Certainly, probably the most resource heavy conversation we've had since 2008, I want to say, and the financial crisis. You know, as a district leader, how do you think about your resourcing? Obviously, you had the federal freeze of funds and the unfreeze of funds, which I know may have lesser of an impact on you all given your structure. But how are you all thinking about that? And how do you think about your budget going forward and your resourcing going forward?
Yeah. So when I presented the budget to the board, I didn't present any federal dollars just because of how volatile it was. One day you were getting it, one day you're not, and just with that, um, we didn't budget any of those federal funds, title funds and things like that. And then our Title II, which is a professional development, which is linked with that, and it's all about the kids, right? So through our title, we offer Title I coordinator who oversees, our intervention programs. And then we have Title I paraprofessionals that are help delivering some of that tier 2, tier 3 instruction. So we said, we're not going to take that away. That's a must have because that's been our major part of our success. So if we took that away, we'd be in trouble. So, we had to find a way to keep those things going in a flow because they get results. It's what's best for kids. And so that's the mindset that we went into with that. And, and then some of those, nice to dos, those get kind of put on the back burner. And hopefully those nice to dos, when you do get some other funds, that those nice to dos can happen. So that's the kind of approach that we looked at it. And just making sure that we're meeting the kids' needs the best that we can.
It's interesting. We talk a lot about the work we do outside of professional learning is on scheduling and matriculation pathways and ensuring that like everything we offer to kids really align to that kind of really effective post-secondary need. And it seems like you all have done a lot of that analysis with your community, with your business community to understand, hey, these are the matriculation pathways that make sense. And maybe having to make hard choices to say, as much as we want to offer 6 years of fill in X, Y, and Z language, it's actually like we'll use an alt school or we use some other form to do it versus investing in it directly out of those funds, but like being highly focused with the dollars. As we head into what feels like a 26-27 school year that will be much more uncertain, or certainly we can be certain there will be smaller dollars available. How, based on your experience, would you encourage the district leadership maybe listening to this to take advantage of the next 10 months to be ready for that conversation?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, because to provide services, with the kids, you need those dollars, and something has to give. And I guess for other district leaders, they have to know what moves that needle in their community, and then also what is most needed through that. So it's in having those conversations with your principals and your other department heads and whatnot is critical to make sure that you all are on the same page, right? Because making that decision as one person would probably not go very well. So getting as many people as you can involved in those critical conversations, and they're not fun, because when you talk about money and you don't have the money to do certain things, that's just tough. So yeah, I would say make sure you're being collaborative.
I think one of our pieces of advice to leaders is, now it's a good time to be talking to the leaders of your school board too. Here are the things, because I think what everyone wants to avoid is here's a 10% cut, just, versus being strategic around what are those things that drive the needle the most. And that makes a ton of sense. I think that's definitely a position we resonate with. Well, not to flip gears too fast on you from the doldrums of budgeting to kind of the future, but I do think that despite all the chop, there's something beautiful about some of the simplicity of what we're seeing, right? Like, how are we using our dollars to highest effect? How are we making sure students are post-secondary ready? And that, I think that there's some hopeful notes that we can also land on in here. But I would say to you, Adam, as a superintendent, you've seen a lot going on. We've talked about some of the hard choices you've had to make. You came into this to make a difference. What gives you hope and what keeps you going in the industry?
I mean, just the kids, and when you sit back at a graduation and you hear, every kid's name, where they're going, post-secondary, that gives me the fuel to keep doing what I'm doing. And then when those kids come back, to the school and they say, "Hey, Mr. Bowen, I'm doing this right now." And when you hear those stories and you see that success, that makes you know you're doing everything right. And so that's the kind of thing that keeps me going, is just connecting with those kids, having those conversations and following up with where they're at in their lives.
That is a wonderful and beautiful bookend to it. Superintendent Adam Bowen, New Buffalo Area Public School, thank you for the time, and we really appreciate having you.
Yeah, thank you. It was a blast.
All right. Thank you to all of our listeners. And if you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share. And you can find more episodes on podcast.betterlesson.com. We'll see you in the next one. That wraps another episode of the Lessons Learned podcast. Thank you for listening. For show notes and more about Better Lesson, please visit betterlesson.com/podcast. Lessons Learned is hosted by Better Lesson, the leading provider of data-driven, high-impact, system-wide K-12 teaching and learning solutions. We partner with states and districts to support every educator in developing the next generation of resourceful, compassionate, and resilient learners who are college and career ready. Our work has impacted more than 80,000 educators and nearly 3 million students nationwide. See you in the next episode.